Welcome everyone to Lecture 19 on the Cold War. We need to spend some time today talking about the tensions that will begin to build almost immediately after World War II between the Soviet Union on the one side and the United States and many Western allies on the other side. But first, let's figure out, well, what is a Cold War? When we think about a regular war, we associate it obviously with death and destruction. And so by that definition, the Cold War is accurate. I'll explain what I mean here in just a moment. But essentially, the Cold War that develops between the Soviet Union on one side, the United States and its Western allies on the other side, while it will be marked by warfare, it won't be an ongoing series of engagements between both sides. Instead, I want you to think about the Cold War as a long-standing grudge match between the Soviet Union, the U.S., and its other allies. Now, what do we mean by an ongoing grudge match? Why is there one? Well, if you'll recall that the Soviet Union, after World War I, had transformed itself into a communist nation, and this put it at odds ideologically and economically with a number of Western powers, including the US and Britain and France. These were capitalist countries that disliked communism. And what we'll see is the United States' use of atomic weaponry against Imperial Japan to bring an end to World War II is going to send shock waves through the Soviet Union. And in fact, what we will see is while publicly Joseph Stalin, the leader of the Soviet Union at this point, while publicly he supported the U.S. and its use of the bomb to knock Japan out of the war, privately he was very disturbed by this turn of events. He ordered a crash program in the Soviet Union to develop atomic weapons of their own. And by 1949, parity had been achieved. The Soviets will have their first successful test of an atomic weapon in 1949. All right, so what we're seeing is, in addition to this kind of war of words, is a military buildup on both sides. And when we think about some characteristics of this Cold War between the United States and its allies on one side and the Soviet Union and its allies on the other side, we look to the concept of mutually assured destruction, or MAD. Mutually assured destruction refers to the fact that by 1949, not only does the United States have this very powerful weapons technology in the form of atomic bombs, but now the Soviet Union has it as well. And for both sides to get into a direct military confrontation with one another, they would both bomb the crap out of one another, and it would be game over globally. In other words, these new atomic bombs are a real game changer. And so what keeps these hostilities somewhat in check between both sides during the Cold War is this concept of MAD, or mutually assured destruction, that whoever fires first, there's going to be a volley returned by the other side of atomic weapons, and that no one is going to survive this. So in other words, you don't want to kick off some hostilities because it would escalate to a global conflagration and no one would win. Everyone would lose. So this concept of MAD is one reason why you never see, during the Cold War, you never see a Soviet soldier taking aim at an American soldier or vice versa, because the stakes are simply too high. Now, I mentioned just a moment ago that the Cold War was marked by violence. Trust me, there will be a lot of people dying, a lot of suffering and pain associated with the Cold War. But it will never be a direct standoff between both sides. Instead, another characteristic of this Cold War is the concept of proxy wars. A proxy simply means a stand-in. If you don't want to do something yourself, or you can't do something yourself, you might appoint a proxy, an intermediary, and you might enlist them to do the things that you need done. And so from the standpoint of the Soviet Union and its allies on one side, the United States and its allies on the other side, there will be plenty of wars in which they will try to undercut the other side, but they're going to work through these third parties. So we'll have a series of proxy wars, the Korean War, which we'll discuss in just a few minutes, the Vietnam War. Here is where other actors are enlisted to help both sides further their particular cause, without them having to actually put their soldiers on the battlefield. Now, in particular, the relationship between the United States and the USSR quickly turned sour after World War II. We will see that Stalin doesn't like surprises, and the fact that the United States has a weapon that he doesn't have, like I said, this is causing him a tremendous amount of tension. The ideological differences between both sides were too big to overcome as well. As early as 1944, the Communist Party in the USSR, their slogan became, quote, "The war on fascism ends, the war on capitalism begins." Stalin will end up being just as much, if not more so, of a mass murderer than Adolf Hitler. There will be purges of returning soldiers and civilians from the war. Many of those considered disloyal to Joseph Stalin or not loyal enough. They'll be forced into labor camps. Soviet culture and art will be purged of all of its Western influences. Orthodox Christianity came under attack, and Soviet Jews were even accused of being anti-socialist or secret Western sympathizers. Hundreds of thousands of people were disappeared, and millions will die at the hands of Stalin, including those in Ukraine that were forced into a famine situation to quell an independence movement there between 1932 and 1933. So Stalin is a man obsessed with unlimited power and very fearful of the United States. It's not surprising, therefore, that tensions quickly arose over the fate of Eastern Europe after the war, as it became clear that Stalin wanted to increase Soviet power in the region. This was precisely what many Western powers were worried about, however. They did not want to see the Soviet Union increasing its authority over Eastern Europe. And at the Yalta Conference that will be held in February of 1945, you'll see that Stalin will meet with Churchill of Great Britain, as well as President Roosevelt of the United States. And he will agree to leave Eastern Europe alone, to let those countries at the end of this conflict determine what sorts of governments they want. He agreed to free elections in this area. That's not what will happen, however, after the war. Stalin will break his promises, and in Poland, a Soviet-controlled government would simply be established. They're creating a number of Soviet satellite states to surround them. In other border nations, they were forced in Eastern Europe to establish communist governments, such as in Hungary and Czechoslovakia. Basically, the Soviet Union, in a bid to protect itself from another invasion, was trying to create a series of buffer states in Eastern Europe. By turning them into fellow communist states, they were basically using them as puppets, controlling them from Moscow. This is deeply disturbing from the standpoint of the United States and many of its Western allies. How to deal with these rising tensions? We will see a new international diplomatic body set up after World War II designed to negotiate problems such as these between powers. The United Nations will be formed in April of 1945. This will be a General Assembly with delegates from each nation, much like the League of Nations had been. It's very different, however, from its predecessor, the League of Nations, which had stood idly by while Hitler chewed up much of Europe in the 1930s. A key difference is the United Nations will have a military enforcement mechanism. They will be able to vote to actually send troops onto the ground. This will be known as the UN Security Council, and there will be 5 countries that will have permanent seats on this Security Council: the United States, France, Britain, China, and the USSR. These countries will always get to vote on whether or not military force should be deployed against other powers. And then there will be 6 other states that will rotate in and out. Those are impermanent seats. You'll have countries that will roll on to the United Nations Security Council for a while, and then they're going to roll off to be replaced by a different country. Another key difference between the United Nations and its predecessor, the League of Nations, is that the United States will be a member. The Soviet Union will be a member from the very get-go. And the United States will not be the only Western power concerned about what they consider to be kind of unchecked Soviet aggression in Eastern Europe. Prime Minister Winston Churchill of Great Britain will deliver his so-called Iron Curtain speech in March of 1946. And the figure of speech that he's employing, that from Stettin in the Baltic to Trieste in the Adriatic, an iron curtain has descended across the continent. He doesn't mean a literal, curtain made from iron. He's talking about the influence of the Soviet Union or the USSR, that as they have absorbed all of these Eastern European countries, they now are inaccessible. It's almost like, you've deliberately cut that area of the world off from every other power. And he's also quite clear that what Western powers, including his country of Great Britain, as well as the United States and Canada and many other countries, what needed to happen is a firm show of strength from these Western powers. He's very clear that he said, from what I've seen of our Russian friends and allies during the war, he said, I'm convinced there's nothing more they admire as much as strength, and nothing for which they have less respect for than weakness. But this kind of rhetoric, no matter how accurate it may have been, only serves to inflame tensions between both sides. Now let's take a look at the situation on the ground in post-war Germany, which had been descended upon by the Western Allies coming from the Western Front and had also been taken over in the East by the Red Army of the USSR. At the end of this conflict, we will see that Germany will be divided into zones of occupation by the Allied powers. You can see those zones here on the map. And then also the capital city of Germany, which lie within the Soviet sphere of influence. The capital city itself, look at the map here. There's an inset map. The city itself will also be basically divided into zones of influence among the victorious powers. Well, as you might expect, the vision that many of the Western powers have, the United States, Great Britain, and France, is they want a united Germany, and they want it to develop along democratic lines. They want to see a capitalist economy emerge in this region. That is the opposite of everything that the Soviet Union wants. Having been invaded not just once, but twice by Germany in a 35-year period, the Soviet Union wants Germany to be permanently crippled. And they certainly do not want Germany turning into a capitalist state. They want it to become another communist satellite state. The standoff between both sides over their competing visions over the future of Germany reaches its apex in the Berlin Airlift of 1948 and 1949. What the Soviet Union is going to do to try and stop the reunification of Germany under the power of the Western Allies is they're going to surround the city of Berlin, and they're going to cut off all land and water routes into the city. They're going to blockade. They're going to send the Red Army to surround the city of Berlin to make sure that no shipments of food or medicine or clothing or coal get through to the city. Why are they doing this? Well, this is them attempting to put their foot down by saying, no, we are not going to be bullied by the Western powers. We do not share your vision of a resurgent Germany. You will listen to us. All right, so this blockade is going to cause a number of hardships, right, for the citizens of the city of Berlin. They're not going to have enough coal to heat their homes. Winter is looming. They don't have enough food. What will happen is the Western Allied powers, including British as well as U.S. pilots, will commence a whole-scale, round-the-clock airlift of goods that were dropped to the welcoming citizens of Berlin. In all, about 250,000 flights took place over the city of Berlin, delivering a total of about 2 million pounds of supplies to needy residents there. This could go on indefinitely, and that's the message that the Western powers are sending the Soviet Union. We will not be bullied by your attempt to starve out the population of Berlin. Now, the Soviet Union has the technology to shoot these planes out of the sky. But to do that would be an open declaration of war against the Western powers. And no one wants another war at this time. Plus, the Soviet Union has not yet, they're on the cusp of doing this, or almost there, creating their own atomic weapons. But still, at this point, the United States, should a war break out, the United States is the only power that has atomic weapons. So basically, the Soviet Union realizes their attempt to blockade, their attempt to force their will on the Western powers is going to fail, and they will lift the blockade of the city. Ultimately, what will happen is Germany will be divided into an East Germany that will become a Soviet satellite state, and then a West Germany that will become a Western-style capitalist democracy. Even the city itself of Berlin will remain divided between a Soviet-dominated sector and a Western-dominated sector. More on that in the second part of our recorded lecture.